we've got SSL VPN, which is our Secu extender. That's the name of the software. It's a free software client that's available on our website. And for client to site, you can set up remote SSL VPNs. That's what our firewall supports. It's not the most secure or the recommended way of doing it, but it is one of the more popular ways of doing it because it's easier and it's less expensive because it's free. And then we also support L2TP. L2TP is the native VPN that's built into every operating system. You've got L2TP on Android, on iOS, on Windows, on everything. And so our firewalls will support that direct VPN connection from an OS. And then, of course, we got EasyVPN for ease of use. It's a zero configuration remote access. Basically, what that's referring to is our IPsec VPN solution. If you purchase our IPsec client software, which you don't have to because any third-party IPsec client software works, but our IPsec client software will auto-provision the client device to the firewall. That way, the only information that you need to put in that IPsec client is the destination, in other words, the public IP address, or ideally the DNS, and then the credentials for that VPN account. And then once that dials into that firewall, once that matches, a firewall will send all the configuration information needed to create that VPN tunnel to the client. So it's an easy single click connection so that they can be at Starbucks, they can be at home, they can be wherever. And then this tool, because of the automation, it also allows you to do auto RDP. So if you've got a client that's got a workstation set up in an office that they want to work from, instead of using an unsecure way of doing it, like GoToMyPC or TeamViewer, all those unsecure ways of third-party ways of doing it, all you got to do is set up an IPsec VPN tunnel using the IPsec VPN client on their workstation, and then facilitate auto RDP. So when they click connect on that VPN client, it immediately establishes a VPN tunnel to that firewall. And then that firewall, their profile launches RDP into their workstation. So with a single click, it will connect securely and launch Windows desktop services, Windows desktop sharing services into that workstation of your choice. And of course, that's based on the profile you create on that firewall. And then we have your high throughput IPsec. It's just an overview with SHA-2 encryption. And then our firewalls also maintain an antivirus so that you can keep viruses off of your network. There's common misconception out there that if you have endpoint security, that's good enough. That's wrong. Endpoint security can only protect that workstation. It does very little to protect your network. And not only that, but that endpoint security is only as good as the resources available to it. Because a lot of endpoint securities out there nowadays have like AI and different things built into them, which is cool and all. But if the workstation doesn't have the amount of memory and processing power to be able to catch threats when they happen, you're not going to, which is why there's a very little, it's a very small percentage in regards to the number of threats that AI type of security can catch, which is why you always want security on your firewall, because your firewall is the front door to the house. Without security at the front door of the house, you're letting bad guys in, you know? So that's what the antivirus is for. And then, of course, your content filtering. It's more than just blocking websites. Our content filtering has what's called safe search. Safe search is a feature that you can enforce into certain, like let's say there's a group, your sales guys. You don't want them accidentally searching something that brings up explicit search content on Google, Facebook, Bing, whatever it may be. Well, that's the point of safe search, is that even if you're not trying to block certain websites, you still want to implement safe search into those circuits so that when those guys do their various searches on various search engines, it filters out explicit search results. That way you can provide liability protection to businesses, because if somebody gets offended by something on the screen, who knows what could happen. So if you're having those types of conversations with your customers, then you got to have content filtering in order to provide that kind of security to the client. And then we've got layer 7 application intelligence, which identifies all the applications on the network. That's what will show you Facebook, YouTube, Netflix, Hulu, Instagram. It'll show you all the applications, VPN applications, BitTorrents. If you want to control data that's on your network via applications, that's what that tool is for. Because content filtering only monitors port 443 and 80, your URL traffic. And so it uses URLs to manage the websites. Whereas, so in other words, if you block Netflix or something, you're not going to keep them from getting audit on their cell phones. That's the purpose of App Patrol, which is the L7 application intelligence, is that will identify those packets going over those other ports so that you can directly manage applications that are allowed or not allowed to be managed on that network, or operate on that network rather. And then we have Geo Enforcer, which is where you can block communications with certain countries based on their Geo ID. Now that's communication internally. You can't necessarily stop them from reaching to you, but you can do your best to identify those IP addresses using that Geo Enforcer to prevent the amount of traffic that comes in and out of your network to various countries based on their Geo IP location. And then there's sandboxing and machine learning. That's a cloud supported tool in which guards against ransomware. And then of course we provide 0-day protection using that tool. The minute there is a threat found via using the sandbox, we create definitions, which are then shared with every ATP firewall. So it provides 0-day protection. So when you're using this tool on an ATP, you get protection against, unknown threats that are found in Europe and around the world. We're a global company, as previously mentioned, so these firewalls are already positioned around the world, providing that type of support. Botnet malware blocker, that's part of the IDP, and other tools on the firewall. Intrusion prevention, also the IDP. And then, of course, for your reputation filter. The reputation filter, there's various kinds. We have an IP reputation filter, a DNS reputation filter. We have a URL threat filter. And those are dynamic tools. Those tools are updated daily, and those tools are maintained in the cloud. And those provide protection against phishing attacks. That's actually the more prevalent thing that's happening outside of ransomware. And that's what those tools do, is they help guard against phishing attacks and other unknown threats, because as you guys already know, the best way to guard against phishing attacks right now is to educate the end user, because bad guys are getting more and more sophisticated, hacking domain registries, sending emails pretending to be people they're not. And and it leads employees to click on links that have zeros turned into O's or I's that are ones. And how do you guard against that other than educating your end users? You can't, unless you have a tool on the firewall. And that tool is our reputation filter. And you have to be talking about security services as a solution to really dive into the details of how this works, because it can create, it does have false positives. It can be false positives due to the nature of how the tool works. So you have to have good communications with your clients to really maximize the usage of that tool, so that there's a good understanding of what you guys are doing to provide security to that network using those features. And we can go into depth one-on-one on that if you'd like. And then, of course, we've got integrated Wi-Fi controllers into our firewalls. The old NXC, which is the AP controller, and the old UAGs, which was also an AP controller, all the functionality of AP controllers have been integrated into firewalls. So the firewall itself can be used just as an AP controller, or whatever you want to use it for, because it's a full L7 capable routing device. But the AP controller is now integrated into it. And then hotspot management, that's a feature that's on our USG FLEX series and our VPN series. That's a feature in which allows you to create dynamic user accounts. So it's for hospitality applications. So let's say you've got like a boutique hotel that wants to give unique username and passwords to every individual that checks in, and they want those Wi-Fi credentials to expire after a certain amount of time, so that they don't have to actively manage it. Well, that's the benefit of this, is that you can create up to 3 different profiles tied to either time utilization or data utilization, because it uses a token system. And then you can make that profile expire after a certain amount of time or a certain amount of data utilized. And then this also allows you to use PayPal if you wanted to charge for the internet in some fashion. It's not nearly as popular now as it was, a few years ago. Actually, it seemed longer ago than a few years ago. But anyways, you can integrate PayPal using this also if you wanted to. And then we've got link aggregation lag on our firewalls, high availability. SSL packet inspection, and Radius and AD integration. All of our firewalls support these. Well, select models support various services, but all of our firewalls, different series, have these features on them. So I'm going to dive into the different series and what the differences are, kind of the core of what the topic was. I know I said USG FLEX versus ATP, but I wanted to touch on the VPN series because we have that firewall as well. This series is really ideally only focused on hospitality and or like data centers, because it's not a UTM firewall. It's a high throughput VPN firewall. So this firewall is also good for SD-WAN applications because this firewall can be put into Nebula. And then when this firewall is put into Nebula, it goes into Nebula Orchestrator and you get a year of SD-WAN services. SD-WAN is a very complex setup for us. And if you feel that you have opportunities for SD-WAN, please be aware that we offer SD-WAN services, and it is a hardware solution. It's not a software solution. We host it on this box, and there isn't a monthly fee. It's annual. And then when you put this box into Nebula for your SD-WAN, you actually get the first year free. So if you're selling SD-WAN services to clients, this is a really, really affordable. If you use our solutions, you can really make some good money selling SD-WAN solutions to clients using us because our cost is really minimal, especially compared to competitors out there. So if you have opportunities for SD-WAN or you want to learn more about what SD-WAN is, we can talk about it. Just shoot me an email and we'll review it. So the USG FLEX series, this firewall is now newly a Nebula FLEX firewall. So it works in standalone mode or it works in Nebula. Now, when you put it in Nebula, if you purchase the BUN version, because all of these are available as BUN or with no BUN on the end of it. The difference is if it just is like USG FLEX 100, that means it's hardware only. So it doesn't come with any licensing. But if you get the USG FLEX 100 BUN, you get a year of UTM services. And if you put it in Nebula, you also get a year of ProPack. So if you add it to Nebula, you get both ProPack and UTM services. Now, those two licensing have to be maintained separately after the first year. It just happens to be bundled with both if you get the BUN version. Again, the non-BUN version is just the hardware, no licensing. But it can still go in Nebula. So if you put the non-BUN version in Nebula, it just doesn't come with any licensing. Now, these firewalls, these are your basic UTM gateways. These firewalls have the traditional IDP, and then of course you got your antivirus, you got your content filtering, and you got your app patrol. So these are your traditional UTM high throughput firewalls. These are very popular for us because our original Zyxel series was offered through Micro Center and other resellers. So they got visibility to the consumer market because they could be purchased through consumer channels, which is one of the reasons why the Zyxel USG firewall is one of our Zyxel as a brand on the network side. It's one of our more popular and one of our more well-known product lines because it is pushed through consumer channels and has been in the past. Whereas, of course, our switches and access points aren't as known in the consumer market, so we don't really push those through consumer channels. But with this being newly Nebula FLEX, it gives you a lot of flexibility in regards to how you manage your clients. Now, the ATP firewall, this firewall series is the same stinking hardware set as the USG FLEX, just so you guys know. Which is why when you're looking at performance, they're virtually the same. The ATP 100 is the same as the USG FLEX 100. The ATP 200 is the same as the USG FLEX 200. Now, to clarify, so that there's no confusion, what I mean by the same is they're the same hardware. Like they're the same physical hardware, but they have two separate firmwares on them because they target two different markets. The USG FLEX allows you to a la carte services so that you can pick and choose the select security services you want on it. So if you only want IDP, you can do just IDP. If you only want content filtering, if you only want app patrol, whatever, because it's popular for like hotels that only want certain services. Um, but whereas the ATP, it's a comprehensive security appliance. Only bundled licensing is available for it. And the ATP is the device that leverages the cloud. It uses sandboxing, and then it also uses those reputation filters. So there is a cloud platform that it works with on the back end to maintain all those services. And there is a feature inside the firewall where you can actually set it to update those dynamic definitions daily, because those definitions do change daily in order for you to provide advanced security services to your clients. So it's just an understanding of the firewall to use it on that level. But all the tools are there to allow you to do it. So that's what it means by the enhanced UTM, is that it also has additional features in the antivirus, because the antivirus now has, which I'm going to get into here in a minute because I've got some slides explaining it. But if you guys have looked at the antivirus aspect, you're going to see express mode, and you'll see stream mode, and then you'll see hybrid mode on the ATP. Express mode is where it uses the local virus definitions on the box, whereas stream mode uses the definitions that are loaded in the cloud. And then hybrid mode means it uses both, which is what the ATP supports. The ATP does hybrid, whereas the USG FLEX only does stream or express, one or the other. And then, of course, just like the USG FLEX, the ATP also supports high availability, and it also has a wireless controller in it. Now, in regards to the wireless controller, the firewalls can support an X number of access points per model before you have to expand on that controller with licensing. And then keep in mind, if you're using a local controller, the access point has to be able to connect to it. That's why we have a lot of different access points too, because when it comes to access point management, there's standalone, controller, or cloud. Now, when we say or cloud, it's still technically a controller. It's just changing where the controller sits. Because if you're using Nebula, the controller is in the cloud. And then when you're using Nebula to control access points, you can control an unlimited number of access points, because we're using the resources in AWS to support that. So it's scalable. Whereas when you're using a firewall, it's a local appliance. So you have to, it will only support an X number out of the box, and it can only be expanded to an X number. And that expansion is done via licensing so that you can manage more and more access points with that firewall. So when it comes to your deployments, you got to have that discussion with your client, whether you're going to have it managed in the cloud or have it managed locally. Again, if it's in the cloud, it's a lot more scalable because you're resource limited when you're managing it on the box. And again, that's in regards specifically to the AP controller. So this is a breakdown of the feature differences between the VPN, the USG FLEX, and the ATP. So as you can see here, they do have different tools. And of course, these tools are via licensing. If you don't have licensing on a firewall, that is a stateful packet inspection firewall, based on the grade of firewall. Just routers, that's what routers are too. They're stateful packet inspection devices, based on what kind of tools they have on them. Just all depends on the grade and the size of that device. But when you add licensing, that's when you get these additional features. Because if you look up at the top, every firewall supports VPNs. Every firewall supports Amazon and Azure. Every firewall has a controller. And then when you get into like content filtering, hotspot management, and all the rest of the tools, those are advanced tools that are available via licensing. And then when you use these tools, you're providing advanced services to your clients. So ideally, you're selling a service to facilitate any of these things that's below web security content filtering, because everything from web security content filtering on down needs maintenance. And it requires you to know how to program that on that gateway to set certain expectations of performance and of usability back to that client. So that's a service. So considering that's a service, because your customer has no idea how to program this, your customer has no idea how to make these tools work the way they need to fit the scope of whatever their project is, they rely on you for that, which is why these are ideally used to provide services to customers. That's kind of the difference between us and other brands too, because you don't need licensing for a warranty. You don't need licensing for phone support. You just need the licensing for these features so that you can provide that level of security or QoS to your customer as a service. So, and I emphasize as a service because without your knowledge and expertise to be able to program that firewall, they wouldn't have that even if they maintain their licensing. Because other brands out there have caused a perspective of licensing to where it's just something you resell. And the reason they've been able to niche it that way is because they want to maximize their licensing sales by making it required to have it for phone support. The warranty is a no-brainer because other brands, they don't use solid state capacitors and whatnot. So their equipment inevitably is going to fail after 3 to 5 years. It's just inevitable. It's just due to heat fatigue. That's why they charge you for the warranty, and which is why Zyxel doesn't have to. But the phone support also is what you have to maintain that licensing for. Whereas with Zyxel, you don't need the licensing for phone support or the warranty. So it's not a transaction. The license isn't there for you to resell to your customer because you have to use it to provide a service to your client. Now, granted, if you're an old school, pure break fix mentality kind of service provider, and that's what you're doing, I mean, you can continue doing that because it is revenue. Don't get me wrong, but there's a lot better ways to utilize that because you could be using it to sell services back to your customer versus selling a $200 SKU. Because you don't have the leverage for a warranty or phone support with that $200 SKU because we give that to you for free. That $200 SKU is to provide these services to that client in which only you know how to configure to set the expectations of the performance back to that client, hence it being a service. So anyways, that's the concept behind the licensing. But that also affects the product selection because which is the main reason we wanted to look at these differences. Because the ATP, considering it is a comprehensive security device, it's for businesses, businesses that need to be protected against unknown threats like ransomware or like phishing attacks. Whereas the USG FLEX, it can't protect against ransomware. It can't protect against phishing attacks, but it's surely going to keep bad guys off the network because it has IDP. It's got your botnet filter. It's got the antivirus on it to keep all known bad actors off. So one of my best analogies when talking about this stuff to users that don't have a comprehensive understanding of how all security solutions work, because it's not just one thing. It's a picture. You got to draw the entire picture for your client when you're discussing it. So the easiest way for me to draw the picture is to use the front door as an analogy, because your firewall is your front door, and a VPN firewall on your front door, if it's not thoroughly locked down, it's like having a screen door because it's an SPI gateway. It simply passes traffic based on policy routes and port forwarding rules, which is what a firewall is. So there's nothing actively guarding against anything. It's simply passing traffic specifically based on how you program it. And you have to be an engineer to basically know everything about everything with these object-oriented firewalls because they are very advanced. So with that being said, a VPN firewall is like having a screen door on your front door or any other firewall without licensing. The USG FLEX is like having a bouncer at your door. You got a bouncer there to look at all the traffic to find out whether it's a bad actor or not. If it is a bad actor and it knows it's a bad actor, it's going to not let it into your network. It's going to keep bad guys off your network. It's going to prevent bad things from happening to you. Whereas the ATP is like a bouncer standing there with a cell phone in his hand. He's got access to the internet. So if he doesn't know who you are when you're knocking on that door, if he doesn't have you on his list as being a bad actor or anything, then it looks you up on the internet before it allows you into that network. And that's essentially what the sandboxing is. That's what those reputation filters are for, is it queries what that traffic is prior to allowing it into the network to verify that it's secure and that it's safe before it's even allowed in. And that's the nature of the ATP firewall. That's why it's called the ATP. It's the Advanced Threat Protection Gateway. So again, it's like a bouncer with, the internet. So just to quickly touch on this again, the USG FLEX is a newer firewall. It recently replaced the USG series as well as the NSG series. The USG series legacy was the USG 40, 60, 110, 210, and 310. Don't be confused with the USG 20. The USG 20-VPN is still an active, very active current firewall. It's our smallest stateful packet inspection gateway. I think it's roughly street price around $200. And it's great for small basic applications that just need remote access for things or whatever. But you can't maintain active security services on it. It's just it's a small stateful packet inspection firewall. And due to the nature of the popularity of that device, we kept it because it's still current. It's still good for what it is. It's still awesome at the price point. So it's still a current model. However, the 40, 60, 110, 210, 310 were replaced with the USG FLEX. Same with the NSG series. Once the USG FLEX was brought into Nebula, we discontinued all the NSGs. Now, I still have some NSGs and I still have some USGs. So if you have applications to where you want to purchase those for whatever reason, reach out and ask me. Some of them I'm out of stock on. Some of them I still have. On EOL products, we still give you a 5-year hardware warranty. So even once something technically goes EOL, when you compare that to other brands, our EOL warranty is better than a lot of other brands' brand new product warranty is. So you shouldn't have any fear of using our products, even if it's EOL. The only challenge when you're using EOL stuff is the licensing, because the licensing for these USGs, like the security services, the 40, 60, 110, 210, either the end of this year or the beginning of next year, we're going to start discontinuing some of those security services, because the security companies that we use to facilitate it, which is on our next slide, they don't like maintaining or modifying their services to products that aren't going to be out for much longer. So they've already stopped supporting extended security services on select USG products. So that's why a lot of our licensing SKUs have been EOL'd and rechanged because of that. But we use these security companies on our firewalls. I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of them. A lot of other brands use them as well. Last Line's one of the more popular ones, used by SonicWall, ForcePoint, Barracuda, VMware, Carbon, WatchGuard, and other brands. So these are very popular security companies that we use on the back end to facilitate the security services on our firewalls. So this is an overview of the express mode versus stream mode versus hybrid mode. So express and deep scan mode, those are what's available on the USG FLEX, and you have to pick one or the other. The ATP supports all of them. So I always recommend to have hybrid mode turned on the ATP. Because of the way we created these security tools, it uses a lot less resources on the firewall. So these firewalls perform a lot faster than they used to. There's been a dramatic performance increase of these USG FLEXes over the older USGs. So I sometimes get the question, hey, Jake, I'm using a USG 110. What's my direct replacement? Well, technically, the direct replacement's a USG FLEX 500 BUN. But the USG 110 with all active security services on it maxes out around 350 meg with all active, with everything running. The USG FLEX 500 BUN maxes out around 600 meg with all active security services on it. So even though it's the direct replacement, it handles networks much faster and much larger at the same price point. So what I'm getting at is the direct replacement isn't necessarily going to be the firewall that you need. Zyxel doesn't, I don't want to name drop, but I come from working with other brands, and a lot of other brands, when they do replacements, they just use updated features and they update their marketing, but the performance is the same. You guys have experienced this, where the replacement, you ask for the direct replacement model because it's the new one. Well, this is it. Well, that one also handles the same amount of speed, the same amount of client size and all that jazz. Zyxel doesn't work that way. When we replace products, it's with the more up-to-date technology, and it's going to perform better at the same price point because we can lower our costs on that hardware, providing better services. So when we do our replacements, your replacement's actually a higher performing gateway. So that's why I really understand that Zyxel's different than every other brand. Even though we're used to having to deal with those kinds of replacements and challenges, we don't look at it the same way. So instead of, Jacob, what's the replacement for the USG 110? The better question is, Jacob, what firewall would you recommend for this network? Their internet speed is 100 meg and they have 20 clients. Well, that's an easy one. That's now, instead of using a USG 110, you can use a USG FLEX 100 BUN, because the smallest one, the USG FLEX 100 BUN, handles network speeds up to 150 meg, and it also has 150,000 sessions on it. So it's way bigger than its predecessor, the USG 40, because the USG 40 maxed out around 30 meg with all active security services, and it only had like 30,000 sessions on it. So this means that its replacement can handle networks like 5 times the size of what the USG 40 could handle, and it can handle networks like 3 to 5 times the speed than what the USG 40 can handle, but yet it's still a similar price point to the USG 40. So you get major performance improvements at a similar price. So you just have to be knowledgeable of what this is to be able to apply that to your projects. And if you're not knowledgeable of that, that's what I'm here for, is to help you with those questions. So don't be bashful. Reach out with those kinds of questions and product selection questions, because these replacement firewalls for the money are way faster, and they provide they can facilitate way larger networks than their predecessors can. And when we talk about performance, it's the same thing with the ATPs. Like here, this is a quick review of all the models of the USG FLEXes here. But the reality is that they have the same, well, I'm not going to jump to those slides yet. I guess I got slides in between. But the reality is that the performance and the specs that are listed on these USG FLEXes by model is the same as the ATP. So what makes you decide between one model or the other is the level of security services you're providing that client. So as an MSP, you're selling managed services. So on your service level agreement, you ideally want to have a separate line item for a higher level of service to that client, which is selling security services as a service. Because when you're selling security services as a service, you can simply turn on the features on the ATP that the USG FLEX doesn't have. So the USG FLEX, they come in at 100, 200, 500, and 700. And then the ATP is the same. And then that flexibility slide is in there to show you the USG FLEX works in Nebula. The ATP does not yet, but it will by the end of the year. I don't want to give you a date because I've been given a date, but I never trust those dates because it seems like they always get pushed back, and then it frustrates my partners. So I'm not going to publish a date until I know that HQ is pretty solid on it. But it is before the end of the year, though. And in fact, technically it was September something, not to get you all too excited, but it's coming sooner than later. So don't be bashful about using ATPs in regards to the Nebula management. And then the next couple slides is just showing information on what the transition is from the NSGs to the USG FLEXes. And you can apply the same rules to the ATP because the NSG 300 is replaced with the FLEX 700 or the ATP 700, so on and so forth. And then, of course, you've got the legacy USG 40, 60, 110, 210, 310 on here. And you can see here there's some bigger firewalls, too. We have the USG 1100 and the USG 1900, and then we also have a USG 2200. I've got some bigger firewalls that we don't talk about a lot because the demand for them isn't as high. But I have large firewalls for larger networks that need to facilitate thousands of VPNs. We've got those appliances. We just don't talk about them a lot, but I do have them. So I like this slide because it gives me a chance to mention Circle. I haven't really pushed Circle yet. It's going to be on a upcoming webinar. Circle will be. But what Circle is, Circle's our new platform through my Zyxel for you to be able to purchase licensing through. as you guys know, we already have Marketplace, and Marketplace was developed for end users, for consumers that buy our products on Amazon and whatnot, to be able to go buy licensing for them. And we went ahead and gave access to our resellers and our partners to purchase via discounts through it as well. But that platform, HQ, is discouraging our partners from using Marketplace anymore because Circles come out. So Circle's available through your My Zyxel account, just like Marketplace is. And again, I'll go into more detail on this on a future webinar, but I just want you to be aware Circle is now live. And I haven't fully been trained on it yet, which is why I haven't hit it hard, because I still need to go through that training. I know I've been saying that for like a month. I need to get that done. But anyways, once I've gotten my comprehensive training, I will then be doing a comprehensive webinar on it. But Circle is where you can directly manage your licensing to all the firewalls. It can also hold on to your purchase history. It'll allow you to directly renew licensing to firewalls that you have out to customers. That way you don't have to deal with distribution. So it's just an alternative way to purchase licensing to be applied and sync to the firewalls that you have deployed out there. Now, that's why we say best business practice is to register all firewalls you guys deploy back to the same My Zyxel account, because they need to all be registered back to the same My Zyxel account. Now, my understanding, though, is Circle has some exceptions to that, but I can't really speak to that until I go into my in-depth training. But generally speaking, anything that's registered to your My Zyxel account, you can directly sync and manage for all your customers. Our firewalls are certified in AWS and Azure because we support their cloud platforms. I've been doing some security talks with various trade shows, and want you to know that cloud services is a really big deal right now. There's lots of third-party companies out there that are selling services, helping customers like yourselves manage your cloud offerings back to your clients, because when you're using AWS or Azure, we know it's complicated. In fact, it's so complicated that, and a lot of times when I run across partners that are using it, they're not properly securing networks because they get so caught up in the intricacies of how AWS and Azure services work, they get lost in regards to how to properly secure them. But that's where we come in. We're here to help educate on how to properly secure the networks that you're hosting in the cloud. And you can use our firewalls to do that along with those services, because our firewalls are fully certified with AWS and Azure so that you can securely use those services. Even casinos improperly use these. I had a service provider call me the other day that a very popular casino in Vegas had issues. They put all their they put all their guest stuff up in AWS, like, you know, you get those cards to put in casino their slot machines and whatnot. Well, all that data they were storing on AWS, and they didn't properly secure it, and it got exposed. And then I had to teach a service provider on how to secure that for this major casino. So it's easy to overlook. So if you don't want to be caught and you don't want to run into those issues and you have questions on how this works, don't be bashful, reach out. And then, of course, that's the whole point of our ATP firewall, is to conquer unknown security threats. We really love that appliance because in regards to security, it's great providing security to your customers because it does a great job. And if you properly know how to manage it and present it to customers, it can really create a lot of revenue for you. Just blow through that slide. And then here's the ATP comparisons. It's just a breakdown of the models. I don't have a USG FLEX 800, but obviously I've got an ATP 800. That's the largest one we've got. It's got 2 million sessions on it. So it handles very, 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 very large networks. And then I want to do a quick recap of our partner program, bronze, silver, gold. We haven't done any downgrades since COVID hit. We've only been doing upgrades. I don't have news on when we'll be doing downgrades, but at some point we are going to go back to honoring how this works. And just to do a quick recap of how this works, every partner is evaluated over a 6-month period via distribution, which is why you guys want to buy everything from these distributors. But your sales through our platforms, through Marketplace and Circle, counts towards this too. So if you do less than $6,000 over a 6-month period, and that's January through June, and then of course the second period is July through the end of the year, During those periods, that's how we figure up the volume. So you do 6K or more throughout that time period, you're a silver partner. You do 12K or more over that time period, you're a gold partner. You do less than that, you're a bronze partner. And bronze gets 8%, silver gets 16%, gold gets 20%. Due to the pricing issues that's been going on with all the inflation problems, because we have issues with product costs going up because of, I don't need to go into why, everybody already knows why. There's been talks about lowering these percentages, but up to this point, we've been able to protect it. I have been fighting tooth and nail, and so have the other channel managers, to maintain these discounts the way they are to our partners. And so far, so good. So once you get it set to your partner status, as of now, you're not going to be downgraded regardless of volume until we reinitiate the full partner program again. And again, right now we're only upgrading people. So in other words, if you were bronze before and you end up doing more than 6K over a 6-month period, we'll upgrade you to silver. And if the next quarter you do less than 6K, we're not going to bump you back down to bronze. We leave you at silver. At least that's been what we've been doing up until further notice. So this is I just want to quickly open this up for questions. I know I went longer than normal. I don't know if Rochelle's on the line.
Yeah, can you hear?
Oh, hey, Rochelle.
Can you hear me? Hi.
Yeah.
Sorry, technical difficulty in the beginning. I'm using my phone. So
no worries. I was having problems too.
Yeah. So we have 10 more minutes here. We have a couple questions. First question: what are the target markets for each series?
Oh, that's a great question. I didn't mention that. So the VPN series and the USG FLEX series, those target the hospitality industry. And the reasoning is because of the a la carte services on those firewalls and the fact that they offer advanced hotspot management. The ATP series, considering it's only bundled licensing and it has the sandboxing and the other tools, and it only offers bundled services, that targets the business market. You know, like your dentist offices, your lawyers' offices, your normal business, my office, Zyxel office. We run an ATP. My home, I have an ATP. So anybody that's not hospitality, a la carting services, you want to use that ATP, facilitating the bundled licensing on it, but just picking and choosing what security features you want to turn on it to match whatever your level of service to that client is. That's a great question.
Great. Wonderful. Okay, next question. Are there anything bigger than these firewalls?
Yeah, that's the USG 2200, which I think supports 3,000 VPN tunnels. And then I've got a USG 2200 that can have UTM services or not. And it also, I think it supports like 2,500 VPN tunnels. So yeah, I do have bigger ones. So if you have super large VPN needs, I have firewalls that can support thousands of VPN tunnels. We just don't really dive into those because, again, the demand isn't really high for those. But if you have a need for those, I do have them.
Great. All right. Next question. What is the smallest firewall to handle gigabit speed?
Well, that kind of depends on whether we're facilitating security services or not. That's a good question, because a firewall without licensing, it's not really doing much. It's just passing traffic based on the rules that you create on it. Because as we know, these firewalls are computers. And the minute you put licensing on them, they have to start processing that traffic based on those, how you program and set up those tools. Because those tools are technically software on there that's providing a service to the traffic. So if we're trying to do gigabit throughput speed for a customer that you're not providing security services to, I've seen the USG FLEX 200 without licensing get like 850 meg. But to be safe, the USG FLEX 500 with no licensing, that'll get a gig throughput speed. And then if you're wanting to facilitate full security services, then that's the ATP 800. The ATP 800 is the smallest / biggest one we've got. In regards to network speed, it's the only one that can do a gig throughput speed while providing full security services to that client. So that question also kind of sparks my memory, because we're getting into multi-gig a lot. There are some service providers out there that are pumping faster than gigabit speed to businesses. We don't have security firewalls that can handle faster than gigabit throughput speed yet, because those are expensive, like super expensive. And they just don't fit the SMB market. So even though internet speed keeps getting faster and faster and faster, this goes back to you guys being educated on the importance of security and how it works, so that you can properly discuss it with your client to set, expectations based on what it is, the solutions you're providing. Because the reality is you can't provide security to a circuit faster than a gig without a super, super big appliance, which we don't make. So, but it'll be the ATP 800.
Awesome. All right. Last question. When it comes to network size, why is it tough to find how many clients the firewall supports?
Well, that's because that's kind of a marketing thing. Whenever you see this firewall supports up to 100 clients, up to 200 clients, there isn't technically a hard line on the number of clients a firewall can support. I've had some people argue this with me for whatever reason. What defines the number of clients that a firewall can support is the number of sessions on that firewall. Because every router, firewall, gateway can support an X number of TCP sessions per second. And this gets really important when you get into doing certain applications, because certain firewalls need to facilitate an X number per second based on the services that's going across that network. So with that being said, it's dynamic, because a client could be using 500 sessions, or it could be using 2,000 sessions. So when brands advertise the number of client devices a firewall can support, it's based off of a math problem that they use. Like, for example, by default, all of our firewalls are set to 1,000 sessions per second. So using that rule of thumb, if a firewall supports 100,000 sessions, then you support 100,000. You divide 100,000 by 1,000, and that tells you 100 users. So you can facilitate 100 clients at 1,000 sessions per second. So, but that isn't always the case, because you've got a lot of clients that will use less than that, but then you might have a lot of clients that use more than that. So really, as an engineer, you should know, based on looking at a network, what the average number of sessions per second that network uses, and then you can do the math to determine the proper size of the firewall to implement on that network. Just publishing the number of clients a firewall can facilitate, that's a marketing ploy to make it easy, quote unquote, easier. In a way, it dumbs down the process back to the service provider, because it's not a hard number. But that's why we don't publish it, and that's why it's hard to find. You can find it sometimes on certain spec sheets, the number of clients that we recommend for those devices. But what it boils down to is the number of sessions that firewall can facilitate is what dictates the number of clients it can handle. And again, if you have questions on that, feel free to send me an email or give me a call, and we can dive into specific use case scenarios and look at that together, because these firewalls do have session monitors, and they do have tools to allow you to manage those sessions per second. And again, that's the reflection of the size of the network you can handle.
Awesome. All right. That concludes our Q&A section. Back to you. Okay.
Excellent. Well, guys, I appreciate your time. If you have any questions in the future, email me. It's Jacob, jacob.olson@zyxel.com. As you know, we've been through some changes. We now have Andy. Andy took over West Coast. I technically now am Central. Even though I have no problem reaching out and helping Andy out, my old partners that Andy now supports. So if you guys need anything, give us a shout. We're here to help. I hope this quick, I know I went through a lot of these things pretty fast because there was a lot of information to cover. But if you have any questions about any of this information, feel free to email me anytime, or of course, give me a call. So Rochelle, thank you so much for getting this all lined up and taking care of this for us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Jacob.
Thank you. And thanks, guys.
All right. So that wraps up our webinar today. Thank you, Jacob, for such an informative webinar. And thank you, everyone, for attending. We'll see you on our next webinar. It's every third Wednesday of the month. Have a great weekend, guys. Bye.